Good evening. This evening is surely scintillating as we have amongst us the light himself, Trevor Mackenzie. A very, very bright good morning to you as
Thank you.
the sun is rising. A diligent, respectable, and a profound author who needs no introduction. On on behalf of everyone here, I welcome you to our very own book club read, Ecurious Minds, where we believe where we believe in be the change to bring the change. An ardent belief that rippling effect, starting from local to global, will change the world, and it will make the world a more peaceful and empathetic place to live in. So thank you so much for coming in, Trevor. We all have been super excited to meet you, to talk to you, and ask you our questions.
Thank you, Pallavi, and your leadership in bringing us together. I just want to say thank you. I want to hold my hands up to you and say thank you. You have just been so steadfast in making this happen and so encouraging and supportive. So, um, thank you so much. I'm very honored to be here with everybody. This will be fun.
This is very kind of you to say that. It's, I think, everybody's collaboration works. We all grow together
Absolutely.
and we aspire to inspire. So we start with student reporting. You've mentioned in chapter that bring the voice of student reporting, student voice in reporting. Can you help us, because we are early year teachers, we are PYP teachers, some coordinators. How can we do that on practical grounds? These are some of the
Yeah.
issues and challenges that we face.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. It's much easier to sit with a high school student or a teenager and have a rich conversation. The language acquisition is there, the vocabulary is there, and the patience on behalf of the student is there. They're able to sit still for a few minutes and have that meaningful conversation, whereas younger students aren't as focused or as patient, and the language isn't necessarily quite there, nor is the metacognitive reflection yet there. So that looks like a lot of different scaffolding for the younger students than we would embed with the older students. Scaffolding such as creating some kind of a learner profile activity or document. There are some on my website that you can find for free where we get students to start to think about themselves as learners. We ask them questions about themselves as learners, and that's more than an assignment, isn't it? It's more than a worksheet. It is getting them to reflect and begin to sharpen the language around talking about themselves as learners. Obviously with 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, that looks and sounds and feels like something different than with a 7 or 8 or 9-year-old. But what we're slowly doing is scaffolding to those richer experiences. I tell you, if we are doing that with our younger students, that scaffolding, by the time they are teenagers, that language and that type of thinking, that reflective thinking, is going to be so much powerful than if we're not doing it. So you may not see the rich benefit of a conference around report cards that students at the teenage years will experience, but what you're doing is a big part of that benefit in future years. So although in teaching we look for that immediate benefit, we look for that thing that feels good and looks good and sounds good, it may not happen in front of you. And I just want you to find patience in that. I want you to find confidence in that the little things you're doing now are paying off powerfully for later. And really what we're trying to do, if I'm quite honest and a little bit bold, is we're trying to change the way we talk about learning with our students. Learning is not about merely grades or percentages or numbers. It has to be about themselves. Grades and percentages and numbers, those things matter too. But too often in a student schooling experience, it's all about the grades, it's all about the numbers, it's all about the percentages. So we want to lift up this reflective thinking, this reflective discourse, this reflective talk. Sometimes that looks like having a little 2-minute conference with a student. And maybe they're not giving you the language that you're hoping they have yet, but you're coaching and modeling the reflective questions and the language that you're hoping they acquire as well. So, I think that scaffolding is really important. That looks very different depending on the students that you're serving. You know, as I mentioned, 5-year-olds, it's going to look quite different than 8-year-olds. But I just want you to find patience in knowing it may not look like and sound like and feel like what I will experience at the high school level for many different reasons, but that's not to downplay the benefit of you investing in those structures and that scaffolding routine.
I agree with you here, Trevor, because while you were talking about this, it just struck to me that we are in a process with that vocabulary, with those tools, and to see that action. Yes, it might not come straight away, but the work is in progress. I'm sorry, am I not audible? I'm not on mute.
Yes,
Chandra, what are you saying?
Mr. Trevor. Yeah.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you. I muted myself temporarily and I wasn't able to unmute myself. So thank you for the host for unmuting me.
I'm
You know,
sorry.
I think that's really important that we recognize that piece is that we are in the process of changing how students see themselves as learners. We can't have learning be about the numbers or the grades as much as it has been. We have to introduce these questions and this language so that they can begin to express themselves and understand their strengths as a learner, their stretches as a learner, and what their next steps are in terms of determining personalized goals. And so sometimes at the younger years with 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds, we do most of the talking. I know there's one quote in the book that says, those who are doing the talking are doing the learning. But I tell you, with 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds, we have to understand that we have to coach and model some of that talk first. We have to, because they don't have as much language yet. And so I think there's a fine line there with regards to that particular quote from the book. Those who are doing the talking are doing the learning. Specifically in this context, some of those reflective questions that we're coaching and that we're modeling and that we are revisiting constantly, so students begin to adopt those questions and that type of reflective thinking as their own. We have to coach and model that. So if you teach the younger years, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, you should be doing a lot of that talking as well. And hopefully they begin to pick that up. They begin to embrace that thinking and that discourse and that language as their own.
I'm sure that is going to happen once we start doing that. We have all the leaders and teachers with us. There's going to be a change which is going to come soon. Thank you for that. My second question is, because these questions have come from Ecurious Mind members. We are reading your book. We are on chapter 4. We are enjoying it thoroughly.
Thank you.
There's so much to learn.
Thank you.
Keep spreading the light, Trevor.
Thank you. Likewise.
You're welcome. Thank you. Making learning equitable for our students. How do we do this in our virtual learning scenario? Because understanding that there are a lot of hindrances that we face as teachers. At times we go back with a sad face, that kind of effectiveness we are missing on that. Then how can we overcome this apprehension that we face and bring this equitableness on our platform?
In the virtual landscape, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So my honest answer is virtual learning as it's been done in the last year is not equitable. It's not. Virtual learning, when it's successful, when it's done right, there are a few characteristics of successful virtual learning where it is equitable. The biggest characteristic of equitable virtual learning when it's successful, the biggest characteristic is the learner opts in, the learner chooses, the learner says that virtual learning landscape, that's for me. Evidence of that is you all here are successfully learning virtually because you want to be here and because you can be here. You have technology in front of you, you have reliable Wi-Fi, you want to be a part of this learning. Very few of our students wanted to leave the classroom and go virtual. Many of our students can't. Many of our students don't have technology at home. they don't have reliable Wi-Fi, or perhaps the responsibilities of home are so overwhelming that learning is not something that they can even think about engaging in. Parents are having, you know, their children lift up certain responsibilities through this pandemic. It's not an equitable landscape for many of our students. So I think that's one piece we have to embrace, is if we are coming out of this pandemic someday and returning to a normal learning environment, the virtual learning piece has to be opt-in. And that's kind of a neat characteristic of inquiry. We want inquiry to be something that students find personally relevant and engaging. They're kind of choosing at times their own learning pathway. And we want students, if virtual is an option, we want those students to opt in. So that's one piece. And I know in this pandemic, we had no choice. We
Absolutely.
had to go. We had to go. So this isn't placing blame on anybody here. And this is kind of, okay, now that we have handled that, let's talk about, well, when we have to go virtual, how can we make it equitable? You know, undeniably, some of the things that I've seen work really, really well in the schools that went virtual, how they made it work is that they were cultivating competency development before the pandemic. So competency development, we're talking about those 21st century skills, you know, the inquiry skills, the skills of student agency, skills such as critical thinking, collaboration. In the IB, we've got that learner profile. We know those, what do we call them? Approaches to learning, the ATLs.
Yes.
Excuse me, I lost it
ATL.
for a second there. You know, the schools who were really doing a good job cultivating those skills before the pandemic could rely on those skills in the pandemic, meaning they could give something to students and the students could pick up that piece of learning and run with it. It wasn't as dependent on the virtual landscape because the students had the skills to lift up the heavy lifting, to do the hard work, because they had those approaches to learning. They had those competencies a little bit more sharpened than other students. The students who really suffered, let's say we all had access to technology, the students who really suffered were the ones who were just waiting for the teacher to give them everything. Like, give me the assignment. Why isn't this working? Why, where's the lesson? How can I find this? The students who had the skills could run with it. The students who didn't have the skills really struggled with it. So that's one piece, is that we have to cultivate competency development. Those ATLs are so important. Sometimes in the IB, I see teachers kind of check them off, like, yeah, I talked about that. Yeah, you know, we did a little assignment on that. No. Those are the seeds to agency. The more we embed those competencies and the ATLs in our day-to-day interactions with students, the more they're going to get to a place of agency over learning. Another piece that I want to share about equity in the virtual landscape is that we have to trust our students. We have to be able to put them into, for example, breakout rooms. Let's say we have a class of students and we put them into breakout rooms. We don't need to oversee every breakout room, every minute of every, you know, it's impossible. We can't do it. It's going to make us exhausted and tired and stressed. We have to trust that our students can be in that space, and that it may not look like or sound like or feel like what we hope it would look like and sound like and feel like, but they need to experience that space. They need to find that ownership and that leadership and their role in that space. Some of what I find really equitable when students are in those breakout spaces are giving them some talking prompts, some thinking routines, or some reflective stems. Maybe I assign roles. Maybe we have 3 students in there and I have one be the speaker, you know, the questioner. I have one be, you know, the documenter, the note taker, and I have one be the person that tries to push the conversation forward, like ask a little bit more to get a little bit more out of each person. So they go into those breakout rooms, not just with really clear focus, but some ideas as to how can I use this time? What should I be doing? So that would be something I would prepare. I would prepare those thinking routines, those sentence stems, those roles. I would give those to the students. I would expect them to lift them up. So there are some ideas around equity, and I have to be honest, this hasn't been an equitable learning experience for our students throughout this pandemic. It's been incredibly troublesome, stressful. I think many of our students have suffered through this time. I think we're all looking forward to getting them back in the classroom eventually with us, seeing those smiling faces and eyes. And I think if we're going to go virtual, it has to be opt-in first. So please keep that in mind in the future. Just because we did it now doesn't mean it's going to work in the future unless it's opt-in first.
Right, right. Very rightly said that we are waiting for that time and hopefully to see our children back under the same roof and spreading some magic around. Thank you for that honest answer. The next one comes from the book again. Please explain. If you had to order the group's chat from mic drop ideas to May ideas, what would this order be? Why would you order it as such?
That's a really good question. I love that question. And I actually asked that question to my students. I asked the exact same question to my kids, and they determine what that order is, why certain ideas will surface at the top and why certain ideas don't surface as high on that list. So that's a great example of a question that I shouldn't be making that decision. We should be making that decision. I have some ideas as to what I hope goes at the top of that list, but I want them to help me shape how that list looks and what deserves to be at the top. Partly because the ideas are theirs, right? It came from them, but partly because I really want to embed student voice in every decision we make in the classroom. And and Sonia, you were there with me yesterday in that other conversation, and you all have read this guiding question in the introduction to the book. Am I doing something for my students that they should be doing for themselves? And this is a great example of, I don't want to do that thinking. I don't want to do that assessment. I don't want to create that criteria as to where things should go on that list. I want them to, not because it's lazy teaching, it's actually sharpening their accuracy, their assessment accuracy. They are becoming stronger assessors as they engage in that type of thinking. And if I'm doing that thinking, I'm robbing them of them sharpening the assessment compass, so to speak, that accuracy. So I really love that question, but it's a question that I don't want to answer. I want my students to answer that question. And as they share out ideas, that's where I begin to embed my ideas. Once we begin to talk about this, I could sprinkle in some things that, oh, have you thought about this? Or what about this idea? And then I want to kind of see where the thinking goes as I drop in little guiding questions to see where the conversation could go to next. So, the misconception around co-designing, as we're doing right now, we're talking about co-designing with our students, aren't we? The misconception around co-designing is that students, it's a free-for-all. Students are designing it 100% of the time, and that's not the case. We are designing this together. I ask my students, I include some of my voice, and slowly this list and this hierarchy, essentially this order, begins to form together. So I would encourage you, not just with this example, friends, but with anything you do, how could you embed more student voice in that type of thinking, that type of reflection, and that type of decision making? I think that's very important for us to take away here.
Absolutely. I think it's more gratifying when we see collective collaboration coming together.
Absolutely. And much more rewarding for the students, this sense of belonging, this sense of ownership. It's quite tangible. And I tell my students, I refuse to do the thinking for you. I'm here to help you, but I'm not going to make those decisions for you. Those are decisions we make together. And that type of togetherness and community, it matters to students. It really does matter.
True, true, true. Your talks, your answers just take us back to the physical classroom in our memories. I'm sure most of our educators must be going back to those memories, that this is what we were doing with children one-on-one, and this is what the results were. Of course, it's more compromised online, but that is how it is.
It is. And my heart goes out to you all. It's been an incredibly challenging year. We miss our kids dearly, and I know the pandemic has had different impacts on different families, different students, different teachers, and different countries for that matter. And my heart goes out to you, and I certainly hope that we all turn a corner soon and we can revisit what teaching and learning looks like in post-pandemic classroom. And I certainly hope that happens for you all soon.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you so much. We hope that too. I hop on to the next question. I know you're very tight on time and you've spared this valuable time for us.
We can go
The next,
further. We can go further. Don't worry about time. We could take our time and continue the question. So don't worry one bit.
that's so kind of you. Thank you so much. You can see everybody's smile
You're welcome.
are
No
going
problem.
miles away. Thank you, Trevor. Okay, can you elaborate on how to help students sharpen their assessment skills and compass? Of course, collaboration that we've spoken about. Anything else you can help us with?
Yeah.
Specifically keeping in mind our early years learners are PYPers. Most of us are PYP teachers and coordinators and principals here. So anything that we can do over there?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, a big piece is we want to make things, especially around assessment, but in all learning, we want to make things really transparent, really clear. There should be nothing hidden from our students. You know, our thinking as we are assessing should be out loud. You know, we're always assessing, aren't we? We're
Yes.
always assessing. We need to bring voice to that assessment more often so our students can hear it. It needs to be transparent. You know, I used to do this in my class, sit and notice and think and be quiet. And I was robbing my students of the opportunity to learn from my assessment. And now what I do is when I sit and I do this in classes, I'm watching them as I'm assessing, I bring words to it. I say, kids, do you know what I'm thinking right now? I just want you to hear my thoughts. You know, I'm listening to this conversation and you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking, how can I push this group forward? What could I ask them to take their thinking a little bit to this direction over here? How can I bring some clarity? Because I'm hearing them struggle with this piece and I want to bring some clarity for them. Maybe I'll ask them this and I'll see where the conversation goes. And then I'm just going to watch them in the next couple minutes to see what they make of the question I asked them. And what I'm doing there is not only am I helping that particular group, aren't I? The particular group who I'm talking about is like, okay, this is fantastic. I'm helping every group in the room. Every group in the room takes that context of what I'm sharing with that group and applies it to their thinking. They're applying it to their learning. And so whenever we're thinking and doing the assessing up here, we need to bring it out. We need to be transparent. So that's one way. But transparency also means what's on the walls of your classroom. You know, when I visit schools around the world and I look in, they don't need to look pretty. They don't need to look, you know, like it should be on Instagram. I want to see the learning on the walls. I want to see the thinking on the walls. I want to see the language on the walls, especially at the younger years. So we can go up and point to certain thinking routines, certain sentence stems, certain reflective questions. And what we're doing is we're giving students the conditions, the language to begin to embed that thinking and that language without us having to give it to them every day. We're giving them the language so we can catch them using the language unprompted. That's the beautiful thing, is when we catch them using it without being asked to use it. And one way we do it is we have to make it transparent on the walls of our classroom. I don't want to overwhelm our students with all this stuff on the walls, like it's about to collapse on them. But there are some specific stems, some thinking routines, some reflective prompts that you're all going to use at particular times often. And we want to have students see that. Sometimes it's not words, sometimes it's icons or images or photographs or illustrations. Those can help students get curious. You know, one thing I ask my students at the senior level is, what does curiosity look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? Make a criteria list for curiosity. And students will sit and they'll write down the criteria for curiosity. They'll write like 15 things as to what curiosity looks like. And then I put that on the wall. And so at any given moment, students can look up and say, am I embodying that skill, that approach to learning? Am I doing that right now? Or even better, I could say to students, hey, I notice you're being curious right now. Look up at the list that you made. How are you embodying curiosity right now?
What a clever way to make a checklist.
Yeah, well, it's from them, isn't it? Again, I didn't make
Absolutely.
the list. The students made the list, and I can add things to that list. You'll read about that in a future chapter. You'll read about that exercise in a future chapter. You're not quite there yet, being on chapter 4. But even at the younger years, if students can't make that list, that's where we make that list with them. We ask them those questions, and what they say, we write on that list, or what they draw, we write on that list. Maybe we have students draw. What does curiosity look like? Can you draw that? What did you draw there? Tell me about your drawing. What are you doing there? Why is that person doing that in your illustration? And as they're telling you these things, their language acquisition is going through the roof. But then you are taking that and you're making the criteria, you're making the list. So of course it looks different with younger kids, of course,
I
but
remember
that
I
doesn't
remember
mean
doing
we
this.
don't do that with them. We have to embed that activity with them.
Correct. I remember doing this when I was unpacking the core values and learner profiles. So what does it look to you? What are the actions that you're going to do, which are going to determine that you're being caring, you're being, so this is how this has been done. I'm sure most of us have done that. It's, yes, it's very effective, very, very effective.
And one more thing I'd like to add is as you're reading this book, we are teaching our students to be strong assessors. And we're teaching that with class time. We're actually spending class time teaching our students how to be stronger assessors. That isn't to say we're not actually teaching the curriculum. We're not actually teaching the content. We're not actually teaching maths, numeracy. We're doing that too. We are doing that too. But we're weaving in this rich reflection, this rich interaction and discourse with our students. So when we end up getting to that curriculum and that content, and let's say maths, it's actually much more well received. The learning is actually better, maybe, or more engaging for the student, whatever language you want to use. It's actually much better for the student if we embed this rich conversation and learning around teaching them to be strong assessors. So it's not an either or. It's not like, oh, I've got to do what Trevor says, but I can't do the curriculum now. It's let's do both together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Makes it more rich, makes it more qualitative.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
True. The next question asked by members is request you to please share an example of the 3-point scale you use to document in giving feedback on competencies.
Yeah. Well, again, that looks very different depending on the age group. Giving feedback on the competencies, one thing that I use are those that criteria that I just referred to. I gave you the example of curiosity, and
Right.
students made that list of curiosity, what it looks like and sounds like and feels like. And that's a great prompt for any grade level. What does it look like, sound like, and feel like? My grade 12s love that. 6-year-olds love that. It's a great engaging activity to get descriptive, to get focused, to get talking. So once we build that list for each competency, now I have the specifics that I could give feedback towards and that students can reflect against. Once we have that list and it's transparent, it's up on the wall. So students can see that list at any time. So I could pause at any given moment in learning and I could say, looking at the competencies that are on our walls right now. So this is a piece that we haven't yet talked about in this session, nor have many of you not read about it yet, but the competencies, we actually have large competency posters in my classroom, large icons for each of the competencies students are sharpening. And attached to each poster is the criteria that the students built. So at any given moment, I could ask students, look at the posters and tell me which competency you're flexing today. Which ones did you use today? And tell me how you use them. What's the language? What's that story? How do I know that that competency happened for you? And I could do that in a number of ways. I could say, think, pair, share, turn and talk for 2 minutes. What's your competency experience today? Maybe I want to do something a little bit more robust. Maybe I say, pause and write a paragraph of your competency story today. Take 5 minutes, and this will be our writing assignment today. It's about your learning and your competency development today. Maybe I do something even more robust and I have it be an essay. Write me an essay about your competency development over the last 3 months. And we're going to take some of this essay and we're going to put it directly in your report card. Some of what you write about and your reflection is going to go directly in your report card. You know, that type of scaffolding, from identifying the competencies to creating the success criteria for each competency, to getting students to reflect on the competency in the learning. That's the scaffolding we need to engage in with our students, not for our students, with our students. So the question specifically was around feedback. That's one way where the feedback is really driving the learning, but it's not merely my feedback for students. I'm embedding more feedback for them to utilize. Okay, where am I at and where do I need to go to next? I think that's something I want you all to consider is, how can you not be the one giving the feedback all the time? How can students be given reflective experiences so they understand what they need and where to go to next? And part of what we've done there is we've made that success criteria visible. So they can go up and, oh, I'm doing that, oh, I'm not doing that. And that's their feedback, isn't it? And undeniably, what they choose would have been the same that I would have selected for them. I would have said, you're not doing that either. Oh, look at that. We did the same thing and I didn't do it for you. You did it yourself. That's where we want to get to, is that place where the feedback is so accurate. It's so concise. It's so authentic, and they're driving that feedback. But they can't get there by themselves. It is a partnership. So, you know, the question around the feedback and how do I know when to give the feedback? I'm really trying to create the conditions for students to own that feedback as much as possible. Now I can differentiate, can't I? Now I can sit down with a particular student that maybe not may not be as engaged in this reflective thinking as others are, and I could sit with them and maybe I give direct feedback to them because they're not as successful with this type of reflective thinking that others are. So now I'm able to more powerfully differentiate, because students have a different role in this process. I want to mention too that those students who don't engage in this type of thinking or don't buy into this type of reflective thinking, it's not that they're bad students, and it's not that they're, you know, less students than those who do. They just need us to differentiate for them and scaffold different. So if one particular student needs more scaffolding, that's fine. That doesn't make them less than or poorer than or worse than. That just
True.
means that they're not there yet. And we need to embrace the concept of, okay, well, that's where rich differentiation occurs, is I meet with students, I talk with students. As I notice and as I observe, I differentiate from there. So please engage in with those students that are struggling in this process, that may seem disengaged. They may seem that they don't care. They may seem that, you know, this isn't for me. That just means that they need a different approach. They may need some differentiation. They may need to see that you care and that you're not giving up on them before they engage in this type of thinking.
True, Trevor. As said, as we all know, this pandemic, this challenge has become so challenging for us to cater to each and every child, and some of them are they're not screen friendly also. When we talk of the early years children and those primary year children, so yes, we are waiting for the schools to open for to tackle this and bring
Yes,
up.
absolutely. Yep.
So this brings me to the last question. I will not take much of your time. Request you to please help us to understand how to initiate spider web discussions in the class.
Yeah, I love spider web discussions. And as you know, this isn't my work. This is the work of Alexis Wiggins. Goodness, I have the book right here, don't I? Where is it? It's one of my favorites. Here it is here.
I know
It's
you
such a
shared all your
fantastic
library
book.
on Instagram.
Yeah, that was fun, wasn't it? Yeah. You know, and Alexis Wiggins, Alexis's father, Grant Wiggins and Jay McTighe. So Grant Wiggins and Jay McTighe created Understanding by Design. And Grant Wiggins passed away a number of years ago. He's no longer with us, and his work has deeply impacted my work. And this notion of backwards design, understanding by design, you know, having an end goal in mind, planning the little steps to get to that end goal. That's essentially what Alexis has picked up in her spider web discussions. Her end goal is to have students take ownership over the discourse in class. That's her end goal. So how do we work backwards from there? How do we start removing ourselves from being at the front of the room and create the structures so students can get to this place where they actually own the discourse? This looks like many different things. I'm not going to ask you to buy the book or read the book. I think it does require to look more at Alexis's work. I'm not, going to speak to Alexis's work as eloquently or as powerfully as she. As a practitioner myself, as a teacher who's used spider web discussions, some things that have really helped my students are full transparency. Full transparency. I tell my students that a goal I have is for me to sit at the side of the room and watch you and listen to you own the conversation. And I want this conversation to last an hour. I want you to take up an hour of our class time in rich thinking, rich sharing, rich discourse. I just want to be observant of that. That's my goal. And in order to get to that place, we're going to take a lot of small steps to get there. And we're going to use this thing called spiderweb discussions, which is actually a structure that is research proven to get us to that place. So we're going to start working on this today. A lot of these small things that we do are going to get us to that place eventually. And then when I ask kids to turn and talk, to engage in a small group discussion of maybe 3 kids or 2 kids, they understand that this little thing they're doing now is actually a part of this bigger learning journey that they're on to get to the type of agency and ownership that we hope to get to eventually. So I continuously begin to come back to smaller structures to get to the larger structure. Again, a big question I ask myself is, how can I back away a bit more? Am I doing something for my students that they should be doing for themselves? Can someone be diagramming alongside with me? Maybe I call a student beside me on either side of me, and we're each doing our own spider web as we're watching the discussion. So they begin to see it from a different perspective. So really trying to be playful in how we do this, trying to be really, really explicit and transparent. And I encourage you to look at Alexis's work. She's a fantastic speaker. I know she has workshops. I know she has a lot of free things online that you could find. And I think she would speak really eloquently, of course, to her body of work to support some of that scaffolding. And I think it can be done at the younger years, maybe not with the 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds yet, but definitely beginning to foster those conditions for students to engage in more of the ownership over talk. That should be a goal of the younger years for sure. Did we lose our friend? Did she get kicked out?
Yeah. So she got disconnected. Nadia, would you please take it ahead?
She's muted right now.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Trevor. This is Nadia. I think Pallavi had concluded the session because she had covered all the questions. Is there any one golden nugget that you would want to share with all of us?
Just one. I have so many. I have so many. Yeah, I encourage you to be kind on yourselves. It's been a really hard year, and really good teachers care a lot about their kids and about their teaching. And I just encourage you that not just now through a hard year, but as you return to post-pandemic teaching, you find a personal balance every time you walk into the classroom. It's been something that I've really focused on this year is just trying to be present and calm as I enter my school each day. And that just really helps my students enter learning really present and calm when I am as well. So that's one thing, is to please be kind on yourselves in this pandemic, but also when you return to the classroom, slow down, find more space for calm, both for you and your students. Despite my energy and enthusiasm, this is something I deeply value in the classroom setting, is how can we settle into learning more? How can we slow down? How can we create more calm for our students? Our students' feelings matter. And this is one point I'd like to make, is I ask my students, how are you feeling about yourself as a learner? And I'm looking for things like calm, confident. I feel a sense of ownership or a sense of belonging. I don't want stressed or anxious or overwhelmed. Those are the feelings I don't want. How do we cultivate the feelings that we aim for in our students? How do we create the conditions for calm to occur, for a sense of belonging to occur? Part of that is us being calm, isn't it? And us nurturing those conditions day in and day out. So I suppose, Nadia, that those would be a few nuggets there, is to be kind on yourselves
Thank you so
and
much.
find more space for calm with our students.
Thank you
Yes,
so
Trevor,
much.
we will be mindful of this. Yes, Pallavi, you can take over. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for covering up, and thank you for understanding. Trevor, your energy is so powerful. My power is I'm getting power cuts.
That's fun. That's good. I'm sorry for you. I'm sorry that the technology, and hence we talked about inequitable and unreliable technology, and even Wi-Fi and even power. You know, imagining our students having to engage in learning virtually, we really empathize. We are compassionate. So yeah, not to worry one bit.
Thank you so much. On this pleasant note and this informative note, I extend a very big thank you to you, Trevor, for making this happen. We are honored to have learned from you, got our answers to our burning inquiry questions. It was indeed a pleasure interacting with you. Thank you for sparing your valuable time for our book read club, Ecurious Minds. We hope and pray for more landmarks and success in spreading the light of knowledge. Be the change to bring the change. And that's what you're doing. Thank you so much, Trevor.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone here. That is what you are doing as well. So I hold my hands up to you and I say thank you so much, and all the best this year, and do keep in touch.
Also, Trevor, because we just started the book and it's 15 sessions in the book. We are on the 4th. We are hoping to have you again with us.
Yes.
So this was a request made by all the members to have you again with us.
Yes.
So is that possible?
Yes, let's do it at the end.
Oh,
if
lovely.
we can find some time towards the end, I think that will encompass a lot of the burning questions that occur. And I really appreciate the question and answer. It's nice to be able to speak to burning questions that you have, as opposed to me coming on and doing some kind of presentation. This is fantastic and informal, and I think it really helps your learning. So maybe we can reconnect as to when you are going to conclude the book club, and I can come on then, and we could just find a time in our calendars that work for everyone. And that would be fantastic. It would be a lot of fun.
Lovely. Thank you, Trevor. I'm sure everybody is even more excited now.
Likewise, I love the emojis popping up. Thank you, friends. I love the smiling faces. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. We wish and hope your son gets well soon.
Thank you.
Our prayer and love is with him.
Thank you so much. Kind of you. And take care, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.